Praise the Lord. You know, here in Utah, we have, in some ways, a great experiment going on. To me, because of the size of the state, because this is Utah, and most people that are new to Utah, like I am, I'll admit, I'm brand new to Utah. I've never been to the state previously. I think I drove through it on a bus one time, and the only thing I noticed was that when I got off the bus to transfer buses or something, that it seemed like the city was really clean. Other than that, I'd never been to Utah until I moved here. And I've been here almost 2 years now. And living here, I've run into a lot of people at different times and stages and different places throughout the state. Most of the time, if we get into conversation, people will ask me, why did I come to Utah, or why Utah is what they typically say. You know, and they will talk about how they really want to go to California, or they want to go to visit, or even move to Alaska, or someplace I'd already been. You know, and I always think, well, why don't you like your state? And they always say, well, of course they like it. And they always say, but of course, you know, they are proud of their state. Oh, wait a minute, they never do say that. I'm amazed, you know, I mean, if anything, every Alaskan is fiercely proud of being an Alaskan, you know. I mean, even though it's a myth, but still, you know, it's an idea that we carry if we've lived there, you know, through at least 1 or 2 winters. Californians, you'll find that if someone's been born in California, especially Southern California, they'll admit, I mean, if they've been born in Redding, they don't really admit it much, or Barstow. Sorry, some places in California you don't want to be from. But, I mean, for the most part, Californians are pretty proud of being a Californian, you know, and Oregonians are fiercely independent, even though almost every Oregonian I ever met came from another state. But I was surprised at, so much so in Utah, the difference of not being that, you know, kind of proud. Now, skiers will be proud of the snow, you know, or someone else be proud of something else, but all of them seem to have an issue with the church. Now, since this is VidDevoChurch, I have to clarify the church when Utahns say it, because they don't mean evangelical, Roman Catholic, Protestant, Baptist, or all these other churches, although if you start to talk to them, most of the time they will start saying, well, them too. But when they say the church, they mean the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For some reason, either they're people I talk to are ex-Mormon, or they have in-laws, outlaws, son-laws, or something of their own relationships that are involved with the church per se in some way, and they see that as a negative. Wow. That's kind of sad. You know, I mean, no offense, you know, to LDS, but I think they have a public relations issue in the state. You know, but I always look at the state of Utah because it's so small, and it is compared to other states I've been to, that, you know, there's not that many people, so they're still doing things and learning things and experiencing things that, you know, statehood does for them. Now, they've been around a long time, but they're just becoming multinational, multi-ethnicity, multifunctional, multi-everything. Sadly, we have in the state a lot of influence from the church that, though people don't directly feel negative towards it, indirectly they do. Lately in America, we have this huge backlash against Indiana coming up with a law which, after watching possibly what Utah did, you know, they decided they were going to come up with a religious freedom law. Now, it's not about religious freedom, because whom the Son has set free, he is free indeed. And the reason why Jesus gave us that indeed is because the deeds of what Jesus has brought us to the freedom of means we are free of everything. We are not attached to anything. We are free from sin. We are free from the bondage of sin. We are free from addictions. We are free from the spiritual aspects of the attacks of Satan. We are free from a lot of things. That means that we don't have to be influenced by our flesh. While we still live in the flesh, we do war against the things of the flesh and the things of the Spirit. That being said, politics is a thing of the flesh. Politics is a humanistic endeavor for man to rule himself. Politics and government and self-government and self-rule are all narcissistic, but they're also humanism. They are democratic, republic, no matter how you look at it. It still was supposed to be based upon a foundation of God. Not in God we trust, because anybody can say they trust God, but they really don't. But based upon a foundation of a relationship that would be mandated by the dictates of what God would say to the person who would place in a position of accountability and responsibility. Meaning that government of the people, by the people, and for the people wasn't accountable to the people. They were accountable to God first and then to the people. We don't really have that today. People can get away with creating their own religion. Scientology has finally been busted for being not only false, but totally corrupt. They have been evil, they have manipulated, they have chosen to break up relationships. They have done everything that is against what any kind of organized religion would be about. And they've proven it and demonstrated it, so much so that even in France they outlawed it. So with the recent expose of Scientology, we begin to see how man-made religions are false. Often it's been called, politics has been called the religion of the people, meaning that it was something that you had to have more faith in than actual practical reality of being a part of. Because I'll be honest with you, if you call it a Republican democracy or a representative democracy, nobody represents me in Congress. I'm sorry. No matter whether they're of this state or they don't represent my point of view. They represent what they call the majority opinion. And then by their own personal opinion, they determine what they want to do and what they choose to do in order to do it for the people. Whenever somebody does something for me, as opposed to doing what I want them to, that's not what I want them to do. Don't do something for me, ask me what I want you to do. Now, because government can't do that, because government doesn't want to do that, because no government has ever done that, taken directly exactly what I want, and then operated for me because it's what I want, then they have to peddle influence. They have to sell you an idea. They have to influence you to agree with them so that they can be in office and stay in office. Recently, we had that kind of corruption happen when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came from Israel to America and appeared before Congress and used it to get elected. Nobody denies that he did that. Congress itself has admitted it. Congress has said itself that you're not supposed to allow certain members of different governments to come and speak to Congress during an election. And Netanyahu was right near and losing his election until he spoke to Congress. The backlash, unfortunately, is public opinion and sentiment suddenly realizes after the fact of his election that religious people want to support him, but he lied. He used and abused the privilege of coming to America and using the public and duped them, lied to them. All of Israeli politics knew it. He even at the last minute had to do a flip-flop in politics to lie about his position. He said, well, we're for a two-state, then we're not for a two-state. And then he lied about, well, if you don't elect me, the state of Israel will no longer exist. Well, that's a lie. It wasn't about him. He's gotten so egotistical, he feels like he is Israel and Israel is he. Much like some Christians have failed in seeing what they're saying and doing when it comes to Christian politics. Sadly, I've had to write some commentary on things that Franklin Graham is doing. He seems to be wanting to get it more and more involved in politics like Mike Huckabee did. Mike Huckabee, though he's supposed to be a pastor, got more involved in the propaganda of politics than involved in the pastoring of people. He, quote unquote, in his program said that he still cares, which is nice, but in reality, he still separated himself a lot of times along political party lines. That's not what Jesus did. When Jesus was here, he didn't have anything to do with politics. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest reasons why Jesus is such a universal draw to all nations is because he said, if I be lifted up, I would draw all men unto myself. Christian politics is not about lifting up Jesus. It's about governing people by Christian principles. You'll hear a Christian politician very quickly avoid talking about Jesus and go directly into family values, biblical principles, all those things that are religious oriented, but are not a personal relationship with God. They'll say, well, yeah, I have a personal relationship with God, so I can be voted for. You can trust me. I don't hear Christians say the word trust, but that's what they imply, because they try to use their religious affiliation of going to church to be a part of a church as though somehow that influences their decision making. And yet when a Mormon ran, they knew that the Mormon church could excommunicate the Mormon, so they didn't vote for him because they didn't want the church dictating what, frankly, a candidate could or couldn't do when they were in the presidency. And now we have the reverse happening, which is a sign of the times. We have religious zealots, just like in Jesus' day, trying to promote the idea of, wouldn't it be wonderful if all Christians were in office? No, it wouldn't. It would be terrifying. As a matter of fact, Judaism and its history of Jewish persecution can look back at every time Christianity is in control of a government, Jews are persecuted. You can go back through and use that as a byline and start Googling it and see what happens whenever a nation is called a Christian nation and what happens eventually to the Jewish people. They wind up getting persecuted along with other people. You know, blacks, Chinese, other people of different colors, homosexuals, transgender, you know, all the people that were killed in the Holocaust. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at the Holocaust and you look at the time of when Germany was purifying itself, making itself more Christian according to Hitler's decision of what Christianity was, they did use the pastors in the Christian churches to promote that idea. The pastors were politically motivated, that so much so that after they agreed on one certain teaching that they were going to do on a certain night, Kristallnacht wound up getting all the synagogues in Germany burned to the ground, most of them, because of what pastors were teaching from the pulpit in church. Christian politics is not a positive thing. If you want to know what the answer is from Jesus and from the Bible regarding politics, the heart of a man must be changed, and God controls the heart of the king, and he turns it whatsoever way he chooses, according to Proverbs. If a Christian decides to run for politics, he doesn't use his relationship with Jesus as a means to get himself elected. It should be politics on the basis of politics. What a man does in the privacy of his own heart and home is between him and his God. You don't get down and you say, hey, I want to make it obvious as a Pharisee, because that's what Christian politics is. It's the Pharisaical movement that was around at the time of Jesus, that they were all about temple politics. They wanted to be in charge of Christianity. They wanted to influence the Roman procurator. They wanted to send their scribes and their, legal experts to the Roman culture in order to influence them to do what they wanted in the religious culture to do, and the people suffered for it. Jesus condemned the scribes and the Pharisees. He said, look, you do hypocrisy before the people. You say one thing, but you mean another. You are not living out what God has said. And while he condemned them for their actions, he warned his own people to do what they said. In other words, obey the law. So on the one hand, if you are involved in politics, keep it as politics. That's fine. I don't care. You want to be a zealot? Go be a zealot. Barnabas was a zealot, and he came to Jesus and talked to Jesus. But the one thing that he couldn't accept for Jesus was the same thing that you can't. Can you love your Democrats? Can you love your Republicans? Can you lay down your life for your Democrat? Can you lay down your life for your Republican? Are you willing to give up your rights, all of them, for someone else that you hate? In other words, Barnabas couldn't do that. Barnabas said, look, hey, I hate the Romans. If you want to be king of the Jews, I'll support you. And the Zealot party will go with me. But if you're going to tell me to love the Romans, no way. And Jesus said, look, you don't understand even what you're doing. You're trying to build a kingdom of the physical realm that you live in, and I'm building an eternal kingdom that will last forever. Do you want to build something that's temporary and it's going to change every 4 years, as in America? Or every 2 years, as you constantly have to keep reaffirming what you believe in, because every 4 years and 2 years there's a new election, and then even with local governments you have to keep changing that too. And you find out that you're just keeping perpetuating this myth that you're running like a hamster, constantly doing the political maneuvering, the political fundraising, the political ideology, the political backbiting, and the political maneuvering, and the political compromise, and you have no time for God. And that's the fact. Antichrist, when he comes, is a politician. The false Messiah, the false world system, is a political, social, and business-oriented type of environment. It's meant to take you away from the gospel and from serving Jesus. Jesus said it very simply, I came not to do my will. I came to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of God in Christ Jesus, that God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that through his Son, the world might be saved. If you're involved in Christian politics and you're doing anything else except saving those that are around you, that are your group, your people, the ones you're supposed to be representing, then you're not doing what Jesus said. So at least be honest enough to admit it. But if you are doing what Jesus said, then your focus is on his will, not your will. You see, the will of the people was pretty much answered as far as being what God wants and what man wants, right there at the Mount Sinai. Before the law was given, the people said, look, we want a religious observation. We want a religion of the people, by the people, and for the people. So Aaron, here, what can we have for a religion of the people, by the people, and for the people? And Aaron said, look, tell you what I'm going to do. You bring me all your gold. You bring me all your silver. Doesn't that sound like today? Bring me your money and vote for me and all these other things in Christian politics. But you bring me your gold, you bring me your silver, and I'll make a God for you, and you can worship and party and, have a good time, celebrate, get what you are entitled to. Exercise your right to choose. Be privileged enough to say, hey, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Who cares what Moses is doing? He's up the hill. We want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so they did. They brought Aaron the gold. They brought Aaron the silver. He fashioned it. He formed it. He made it into a cow that he was familiar with from Egypt. Now, you could tell me that doesn't apply to today, but if you look at the Roman Empire was absolutely no different than the American Empire. We don't call ourselves an empire. We call ourselves the United States of America. It's interesting that because we use that word United States because that's what Rome was called, the United States of Rome. They had formed a conglomerate, and they were represented in the Senate by representatives from all the states that were Roman citizens. Now, Rome passed certain laws that in order to be a Roman citizen, you had to exercise certain political functionings of being a Roman citizen. And if you know anything about Roman history, you know how corrupt that was and how worse and worse and worse it deteriorated. That's what happens in Christian politics. A Christian compromises his own personal values in order to make a religious or in order to make a political statement or a political choice that doesn't serve the people. But you see, a Christian politician can't serve the people and serve God, because you'll have to choose one or the other. Jesus said it this way, you can't serve God and mammon. Anything that's about man, of man, made by man, does from man, and man-made is mammon. It's not just money, although money will be the root of all those things that man is involved in. It's always about pride of life, lust of the eye, and lust of the flesh, and those boil down to, in modern culture, money. The money, you follow the money trail, you see where Christian politics comes from and goes. Often you'll see that the word expediency is used, and that a lot of people will do things that are expedient but are not eternal. They'll do it for the moment and then realize they did wrong, but they won't do it for the long-term consequences, because they'll say, we'll pay for it later. Kind of like the economy. That's another place where most politicians will say, well, it's not going to happen in our time and term of office. You let someone else fix it. We'll spend it. And that's the problem with your life. You only have a certain amount of time to live it. Jesus said, sufficient is today and the evil thereof. So today, if you hear his voice, harden not your heart, as it says in the provocation. And Jesus said, go out and make disciples, not make politicians. Jesus said, go out and teach all nations, not go create a Christian nation. Jesus said to go out and baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Not create religious freedom where you get to determine who is and who isn't of my faith. You see, that's part of the problem in Indiana today. They're facing this determination that they want to live their life their way, not God's way. God never said to the children of Israel, leave out the stranger. Come, push them out of the nation like Bibi Netanyahu wants to do over in Israel. He said, look, I want to kick everyone out, and I want to create a Jewish nation for Jews. Well, after he said that, his government dissolved over that very statement, and they had to have an election over it. And he's probably going to try it again, because the Orthodox helped him to get back into office. They want a Jewish nation. They want to kick out Arabs. They want to kick out Christians. They want everybody else out. Now, that probably won't happen, but that's what they want. And they're going to keep inner turmoil, keep making the wealthy of Israel wealthier and the poor of Israel getting poorer. It's just a fact that goes on in Israel today. Prime Minister Netanyahu is a very wealthy man. He's got a lot of money. Just warning you. How hard is it for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven? Trust me. Mr. Netanyahu has passed and agreed with certain edicts that say, do not witness to a Jew. That's why I don't support it. The same thing may be true of what Franklin is sadly doing nowadays when he's getting involved in politics. He keeps getting involved in these political issues rather than talking about Jesus. When you quit talking about Jesus and what Jesus said and what Jesus wants and what Jesus did, then you're no longer following or a follower of Jesus. You're a follower of man. When Moses came down from the mountaintop, he said, look, you choose you this day whom you'll serve. If you want to serve God, here's his laws. Here's his commandments, and here's what I say. And he threw those stone tablets down, and he was ticked off. And he cleaned camp by killing a lot of people. And then when he came back down the mountain, he had the new redone 10 Commandments, which he said are 613. Just kidding. But, Moses came back down, and, basically the people said, yeah, we'll follow. We promise. Yeah, we messed up, but we promise now. And in fact, the matter, no, they did not. And that's what happens in politics. You can tell me today, we're Christians. We'll never compromise. We'll go into Congress and clean house. We'll go into the nation and change it. We'll go to the people and make them become Christian. I got news for you. I don't want a Christian nation. I want you as an individual to do what Jesus tells you to do. I don't want Christian politics and never will be a part of Christian politics, simply because there is no such a thing. There is not anything that says that God is going to anoint the politician. No. Christianity is a matter of a personal relationship with Jesus, and VidDevoChurch will always stand for that. We're here to share Jesus in a personal, intimate way. And if Jesus doesn't have anything to say about the government, except for whoever is in charge of the government, obey the government for whatever the government is ruling and reigning over. But whatever God is ruling and reigning over, then serve him. The same thing be true of the money that he was using as an example, for the image that's face was on the coin that the Pharisees were trying to trap him into saying, who do you obey? Well, you obey God, of course, but you don't obey God necessarily at the exclusion of current civil law, but you don't do it at the inclusion. In other words, you don't stand up and say a law is a religious freedom law when it's not. It's a law of exclusivity, and it's a law that's choosing to make certain rights and privileges for some that is denied for others. That is prejudice. It's a very clear definition. It was used in slavery. It was used to kill Jews. It was used in the Salem witch trials. It was used in the church, in religious law, to come about with the Inquisition to find out who is a Christian. The religious freedom law will do the same thing. It will accomplish the same purpose. It will segregate and separate people, and it will cause all over again civil rights to have to be stood up and asked for, demanded, and finally by the people, of the people, and for the people. Maybe someone will rise up and say, look, we've had enough of this. Let us better to serve the Lord, our God, than to serve this government that is corrupted by these ideas they keep throwing at us and saying it's of God when it's not even from God. So don't get the name change mistaken. There's a reason why it was called Religious Freedom Act, and that was to hide what it really does. Oftentimes hypocrisy is made manifest by who's promoting it and what they're doing. Jesus never had to question whether or not he was going to give you freedom. When Jesus has set you free, you know it. when you look at a law and you're separating yourself from someone else, you know you're not loving the world that God so loved. If you can't love your enemy, then you can't love your friend. Jesus said not just that it was to love your neighbor as yourself, but rather to go beyond that, to go to the point where by His Spirit, by the very fact that God is in you, you could love those that voted against you. You could love those that disagree with you. You can love those that need salvation, that you already having should be out and about doing the work of God rather than trying to do the will of man in politics. Christian politics is false. It's a false idea. It's a false concept. It never works. You can go ahead and try to influence people by being a Christian and happening to have as your avocation or your vocation being in politics. But don't lie to yourself. Don't misunderstand what you can and cannot accomplish. Don't try to make it you're a Christian politician. You're a politician who happens to be a Christian. The same thing is true of sports. There's no such thing as a Christian athlete. There is such thing as an athlete who is a Christian. You see, Christianity would not be about competition. It would be about the completion of the work that God has for each and every one of us, which is mission. And if we are actually missionaries and apostles that God has said we are, meaning to go out and disciple all nations and to build churches and to cause people to grow and to love on them and to prepare the way of the Lord, what are we doing not doing God's will? If you can answer that and then go into politics, great. But if you think politics is the answer, you're going the wrong way, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time with the wrong people. Because you're not going to save anyone in politics. You're simply going to give them another excuse to try to rule and reign as the Gentiles do. Jesus warned the Jew about the Gentiles. I don't know if they meant Gentiles, all of them, including Christians today, but he used the word Gentiles to describe people who loved power, who wanted to exercise lordship over one another, who wanted to be in politics. You better be careful what you're doing in politics, because there's no such thing as a Christian politician, but there is such a thing as a Gentile. And the Gentiles are the ones who politically wanted to exercise lordship over one another. Jesus would have called the Pharisees Gentiles. So I hope you are not a Gentile today. I hope you're avoiding these controversies and these indignations against the gospel. I hope your focus is on Jesus and sharing His love for the entire world as it is at large, because the time is short. More and more, this time of deception, this time of perception, the time of changing the focus and the dialogue from Jesus and His gospel to the world so that some might be saved is being distorted and changed so that people will choose to withdraw themselves from doing what God sent them out to do. Don't mistake the direction when you're using your time to reflect on what Jesus has said to you. Do whatsoever it is the Lord has told you to do, but don't deceive yourself. That's easy to do in politics. And so remember what Jesus said about the Gentiles. And look it up if you want to in a Bible study, because you'll find that just about everything that has to do with politics is what a Gentile does.